Well, hey, y'all, it's Zach, and it is another episode of Red Letter Disciple. Got a great episode today with Dave Miller. Our goal in this podcast is to challenge you to be a greater disciple of Jesus, believing that when we live up to that calling to be great disciples, the world will change. So I'll tell you about Dave in just a moment, but today I want to thank our sponsor for this podcast. It is Hodos, H-O-D-O-S, and you can go to hodosway.com, a brand new nonprofit ministry that is existing in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod for our 18 to 29-year-olds. You can go to hodosway.com to find out more information and to throw your email in to stay updated. We are planning right now for the 2027 first ever Lutheran Young Adult Gathering. It's going to be amazing, and God is going to do some great things. Hodos is a movement road forward for the next generation of Lutherans that's around connecting young adults, forming disciples, and shaping the future of our church body. So go to hodosway.com for more information. Throw your email in there to stay updated. Dave Miller, you talk about 18 to 29-year-olds. He is an expert, especially when it comes to developing leaders in the younger generation. He is, I would say, the nation's church residency expert. And so we talk about what a church residency is and what this program could do for a church like yours. And so it's an awesome conversation. We get into a little bit of the leadership development crisis, especially with the pastoral pipeline issue in the LCMS, and he offers his perspective on that. So I hope you enjoy today's conversation. If you're enjoying these podcasts, please feel free to like, review, rate, subscribe, follow, all the things on whatever platform you listen or watch, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. So let's get to today's episode with Dave Miller, the leader of Leadership Pathway, the residency expert. Let's do this. All right, Dave Miller, what's up, man? It's good to have you on the Red Letter Disciple. How we doing?
I'm great. I didn't read any red letters this morning, but I'm doing well. I was reading Chronicles.
Wow.
The part of Chronicles I was in is very sad. All the bad kings. But yeah, I'm doing great. I am doing fantastic. It has been a very encouraging day. Busy,
That's good.
But encouraging. Yeah.
In my last conference I was at, the first Bible verse was from First Chronicles, and so maybe there's something going on in Chronicles. It was about the men of Issachar, and it's kind of a sneaky verse. It talks about the different tribes of David and the soldiers, and for the men of Issachar, it had two qualities to them: that they understood the times and they knew what to do. And I think that's kind of what this podcast is. Trying to figure out and help is how do we understand the times we're in, and that's a lot of like when we bring a guest on, they really help give perspective on that. And then what do we do about that? Let's talk about that. So I want to do that with you today, but I want to kind of do that in the lens of especially looking at some young leaders and the next generation, if you will. There's lots of trends out there, so I'd love to kind of hear from you, like as before we get into the trends and what it means for all of us. But what got you into kind of investing in young leaders, and give me a little bit of your journey and where you're at today.
Yeah. So it started with, I was in ministry 15 years, primarily I was like the not very talented worship guy. So quickly went from the platform back to the booth. So back there running the show at the mega church, and then found myself out of work and started consulting with a friend of mine. And I thought whatever we called it, I guess consulting in those days. And I thought, well, I could do this till we figure out what's next, because I had only ever been in church work and just thought, in those days there weren't many people side gigging, doing things, right? I thought this would be a 6-month journey. That was 20 years ago at this point. And along the way, I was in, just hundreds of churches. And it didn't, the group I was a part of and still run with a lot of these guys, but they were architects and multi-site cameras and all the tech stuff, or raising money or doing strategy. It was very common for us to help a church relocate, launch campuses, find architects. But no matter why we were there, Zach, this issue of we're looking for a youth pastor, we can't find what we're looking for. So this staffing thing kind of found me about a decade ago. That led to helping churches hire full-time people. I still do a little bit of that with churches we work with, but just the discontentment of trying to help churches find and onboard leaders. Now, I'm talking primarily not about senior pastors. I'm talking about all the middle people, right? And so that led eventually to launching Leadership Pathway, which was this effort. I kept saying, seems like we got to get farther upstream than, onboarding some stranger from across the country. That happens. I understand that. But man, these organizations are going to have to grow what they need. That became Leadership Pathway. We're in our 9th year at this point.
That's cool. So was there a defining moment that you realized, man, the church, capital C Church, we've got a leadership pipeline problem? Or was it just over and over and over?
I would say it was a collective. If we were making a movie and we needed a 30-second scene, I was last week in Southern California, and in Orange County, there's this thing called the Anti-Mall, and there's an amazing Cuban restaurant. And I do remember a somewhat known church leader sitting there saying to me, something's going on. And this was probably, this must have been 2008. He's like, we keep starting over with people. Get someone to year 4, 5, 6, and they leave. They go do something else with all of that legacy knowledge. About the time they're squared up, they're on to something else. We have to figure out, it was in that moment, it was like there's several things we got to do here to create change. And I texted that guy last week. I'm like, hey, I'm sitting in a cube and I am having this memory. I think you were the very first person that ever said to me, like, head scratcher, like, what's going on? That led to, I've had that conversation, over and over again, like most issues, most complex issues. Some people have been suffering with it 20 years. Others just, like, they just walked in the room and they're like, we got to do something. And I'm like, yeah, we got to do something. So I think over and over again, a collective. I go back to that moment. His name's Chris Gilly, and he was a production guy from a large church in Chicago. And I'm still buddies with him today, still run with him. But I'm like, hey, I'm having this memory. Do you remember? And he's like, I don't remember that. I'm like, I think you maybe were the first one, which is kind of funny as sound guy. It wasn't like a priest or a prophet, it was the sound guy who said
must have been a good Cuban sandwich too, or something.
It was amazing. Right? It's an amazing place. I highly recommend it. I would say I just remember really resonating with that because I'm like, no, Chris, it's not just Chicago, man. For the last 2 years, I've been all over and really back to Vegas for me, long time, trying to find people who wanted to move to Las Vegas to work at a church. Maybe that was the early adopter. That was where the problem, at least for me, showed up first, right? I think Jesus said 2,000 years ago, I think he said, look at the fields. There's nothing wrong with the harvest. There's nothing wrong with the harvest.
Right. Plentiful.
Who's going to do it?
Yeah. That's
so
sweet.
It's been around.
Yeah, I want to talk solutions and obviously all the things you've discovered over the years and where you are today. But that's what brought us together to have conversations was Leadership Pathway and Leadership Pipeline. And I know that you're not LCMS, but you've worked Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. But that I'm sensing a real problem with our leadership pipeline and pathways, not just on the pastoral formation side, but also just in our local churches as well, and trying to provide conversations and solutions. And so you've worked with and observed many LCMS leaders. Before we get into kind of what your role is, if you will, and what you've learned with Leadership Pipeline, anything that stands out to you from what you know about our church body or where it's at?
Well, I remember about that same, I'm going back to about that same era I was talking about, 2006 or 7, going to something called the Worship Arts Leadership Institute.
Yeah, Wally.
Back in Wally, we called it Wally. Yeah. And you say Wally to a non-LCM, and they're like, is that a movie about a robot? And
right.
But I remember I had known Steve Young for a decade. He's a professor at Concordia. He's kind of like a hero musician of mine.
Yeah.
I met Joel Wetstein. I met Frank Hart and Kip Fox and all these guys. I had never been around a Lutheran thing at all. Okay. I'm sitting in the back of this gathering. I'm texting all of my non-denominational megachurch worship production people. I'm like, guys, I found our club. I'm not exaggerating, Zach. I remember the moment. I know exactly where I was sitting because I was sitting on the floor, and there was some theologian with a big beard up there doing that.
That sounds like
And then
LCMS.
It was, and it was rich. And then we broke into a seminar thing, and it was like a guy named Adam Countryman and Steve Young.
Yeah.
You know Adam?
I know Adam very well. He's
these
a really funny guy.
They're hilarious. They're probably heretics.
Adam for sure is a heretic.
You can edit all that out. But I'm just saying, like, it was the best practitioner-based thing that met this deeper theology piece that was rich and it was real. And these were the hippest, coolest musicians. I'm like, I've gone to a lot of stuff. I've put on a lot of stuff like that and struggle to have both of those worlds. Now, come to find out, I was on the edge, as we all know. I was on the very edges of your movement. And I understand that because I hang out with Presbyterians and all forms of Reformed people and all forms of Assembly of God and independents and all of the denominations. And so I know that there are groups, there are various ways of thinking about it. I always draw circles, and it's like the people that move to the edges of these things, they hang on to the essence of it. But in terms of, like, we would say best practices, which you guys own the corner on in Phoenix at the Best Practice Conference. But I work with Lutherans and Presbyterians and even people that way far away from my own heritage and history and legacy of how I was raised and where I've worked and been. But I would say if you got them all in a room, they're pretty much all doing the same thing, Sundays at 9 and 11 and Wednesday night for students and reaching people and all this stuff, man. I would say we're way more alike. That's my sense is. I grew up in the most denominational, non-denomination dogma. I have really close personal friends and family members that are a part of that movement. And I went to the edge of it, So I understand that we all have our things we're not going to let go of. But then there's how we engage the world and how we engage mission. A couple thousand churches, 6,000 churches. How many?
Yeah.
Else?
Yeah. Just under 6. Yeah.
So the group I was raised in, it's called Independent Christian Church. And they have a few things they're super passionate about. And you can go in churches that are radically different from one another, but really they all show up to the same gathering. So I framed LCMS up pretty quickly in that way as I've gone across the country and been in a few hundred of them, at least at this point, I would say, and have lots of friends at lots of different levels of that movement. And, they're still changing. They're still changing and ever changing, but standing on the things that are important to them. So.
Yeah, that's the tension I think that I'm feeling a lot is, right? How do you stand on what's important and keep what is kind of distinctly yours and yet still be missional and influential? And I those are the struggles and tensions that we find. And how do you form leaders in a system that sometimes is maybe a little bit more rigid, or many of us think antiquated in kind of the way that it's. So let's talk though, kind of, we'll probably jump back into LCMS type things here and there, but kind of the overarching like leadership development and especially younger leaders.
Yeah.
Before we get into developing younger leaders, what are you seeing right now? I'm looking at a lot of trends, from Carey Nieuwhof that talk about Gen Z spiritual openness, which is, backed by some Barna research. And so what are you noticing kind of about younger generation that's got you excited these days?
Well, we have a generation, And as we talk about this, we're going to talk very generally because in my world, we have generalizations, but then names and faces come to mind, which blow them out of the water, right? And that's been true since builders, boomers, busters, millennials, and now. But generally speaking, we have a generation that wants to be a part of something bigger than themselves. That's the. Is it a revival? People will argue about that, but they're definitely jumping up and down to worship music all night long, and Jenny Allen is there baptizing 1,000 of them at some major university, right? So that is one thing that's going on, is definitely we have this spiritual awakening. They've tried everything. They've seen their parents try everything. There has to be something else. They've been what's gone on the last 20 years. We could just track through the wars and COVID and all the things. They've come to the end of themselves. They're spiritually sensitive. So when you translate that, then what are they going to do? They want to be on mission, doing something. Secondly, they want to be mentored. Now, this is where it sort of breaks, where we're sitting, where we're embedded. There's no management. There is no leadership or management without mentorship, and mentorship is going to embrace all domains of their life. What they're great at are these margins and being in the name of health, in the name of me time, Sabbath, these things that I've seen people much younger than me ranting about this on social media. Don't talk to me about Sabbath. We didn't have a Sabbath when, back when we walked up hills both ways when I started, and nobody cared about that. Then you definitely should not engage with young people on your team. I don't know what that says for their future, but I'm telling you, if you're going to bring in, we always say 20 to 25-year-old, young Gen Z leaders, you will be speaking into their spiritual life, their work life, their professional life, relational life, their mental wellness, the entire domains. So all domains of their life, which is why they want to be mentored, and we love that. But at month 4 or 6 down the road, a pastor might be saying, I feel like I'm parenting this kid. And we're like, that's what we meant when we said there's no management without mentorship. An early boss of mine, great, we're still buds, he looked at me at one point and said, you need to make sure you have friends that are not on staff. Now, we could debate whether that's good policy or bad policy, but what was he saying in that moment? I knew what he was saying. We weren't going to hang out anymore. We'd hung out a couple times, and we're going to do that annually at the Forced Corporate Fun event. But don't invite us over because, we've checked that box. And he was 10 years older than me. I thought he was super old. I was 25. He was super old, 35-year-old. 25-year-olds today are now working for 55-year-olds in these churches. And the canyon of understanding that has to be bridged there. But definitely they want to be mentored. Everyone nods and says, that's great. Here's what it means. It's going to feel very different than 20 years ago when you hired someone and they just hit the ground running because they had been raised on a farm. They were bringing their life skills. They hadn't grown up in a digital world. All of these things that have kind of bankrupted this generation. But they're on fire for Jesus, Zach. They're on fire. They are on fire, and they want to be at the table. They want to be at the table. And we're crazy. We're crazy if we don't strike while this is hot, because there's already signs. I think you mentioned some of the national studies, like, hey, you'll hear little things like they're coming to Jesus, but they're not coming back to church. They're finding it in other ways. They're finding it. We have to be super careful about that. We want them at the table leading with us, but we are going to have to engage in their way. That's the biggest thing that I see. That's where we're embedded. It's like there's this we want to do it, but then it is heavy. It can be heavy work, It not easy.
Thanks for sharing. I agree with that. I feel like we're in a moment that I think sometimes we've been praying for.
Yeah.
And now that there's this openness and this excitement as we're recording, this will also go out in a few weeks. Yeah, there's been every day for the last 8-9 days revival. Again, call it whatever you want, at Southeastern University in Lakeland, Florida. Young people are excited about Jesus again. Many of them are coming to church and showing up more frequently. That's what the data's showing than even older generations.
Yeah.
So what I'm
where
hearing
I'm
is,
embedded, people are calling saying, hey, we have these college kids. They're sitting in the front row. They're bringing their Bibles. They're bringing their friends. They're baptizing their friends. What are we supposed to? What are we doing? What are we supposed to do? And these are like a church of a couple thousand. This is not this is a church that knows what's up, in other words. And like there are places where, it makes the Instagram reel. This week was Southeastern. This is happening in a lot of places. Churches are saying we've had this many. We've had 0.
Yeah.
And now we've got 3 kids, and we don't know what to do. And I'm like, you ought to talk to them. Invite them in. Throw them the keys to something and get out of their way. But it's exciting.
It is. And so what I'm hearing you say is the passion, the openness for mentoring is there, but that because of generational things, and again, we're talking generalizations on generations.
Yeah.
Because of that, it's going to require a lot. It's going to require time and energy, but it's a worthwhile investment of our time and energy, it sounds like, to really pour into this generation. And talk to me a little bit about what you do at Leadership Pathway. You've got a new book. Congratulations, by the way.
Hey, look at that.
It's called Who's the Next You by Dave and Kristen Miller, which is your wife.
The stuff that reads very poorly and is misspelled, that'd be on me. And the other stuff, she probably...
Exactly. The books that I write that are the best have my wife's name on them.
Of course.
So I know all about that. But
right there.
Yeah, and so you walk in this leadership development, leadership pathway field, and so I'd love to hear from you what you've learned. Is leadership development, is it primarily is it a strategic issue, a cultural issue, a theological one? Why do we struggle sometimes to develop these younger leaders? What's at the root of it?
At the root of it is most of us have never been through a leadership development thing. We were pushed off the dock like in Kentucky. That's how you learn how to swim back in the day. Dad just walked up and you kicked and you kept your head above water and you didn't die. Now, we call that the school of hard knocks, and we all start sounding like old guys that, nobody did this. But I genuinely believe we got educated. Some of us were discipled, sort of. We could talk about that forever, as you know. But did anyone show us the ropes? Sort of, kind of, but not really. And it was a different era. It was a different day. The thing is, though, no matter what, and I have talked to all the denominations, and I'm like, tell me about how you got in. And then you were 30, you're 6 years in. How about your classmates? I've never had any church leader say to me, that we have all made it. Our seminary reunion, we can't find a room big enough because we're all still in ministry. No, it's like one out of something, and it's really bad. The school of hard knocks, it's really bad. Where we are in culture, we just have fewer and fewer going into that, right? So out the bottom of that, if you picture a funnel or a timeline, you still got a whole bunch of, I can abuse the statistics all day and just make up numbers, but the great obvious majority are not Zach Zehnder. They're not still doing it a decade or 15 years later or however. No, the great majority made it 18 months, maybe. They changed jobs twice, and then they're doing they're doing something else. Where Leadership Pathway comes in is trying to create a space that's safe for a young person to step into, instruct and coach, train at the front end. We're training this organization. How do you become the place that can take a young leader in, let them fail in a safe way, coach them forward, mentor them? It's a couple years. It's a 2-year process so that they're hireable. We would say hireable and highly desired at the end of it. And the vetting, the personality test, all the stuff that we do on the front end, the interviewing, the matchmaking to these churches, the onboarding, what's the first 90 days look like, all of these sort of like moments over the course. But I would say the path it's as unique as a thumbprint. Paige on our team says if you've talked to one candidate, resident, you've talked to one, because they're all a little different. If you've talked to one leader, you've talked to one. And that's true. If you ask anyone, like, how did you get into ministry and how'd you get, the stories are radically different. We see that even though if you look at the churches we work with, the Sunday morning picture might look very similar in a lot of ways, right? It looks like King of Kings stage. But the stories and how the leaders get there and how they survive, the stuff they go through, it's as unique as their personality. It's as unique as who they are in Jesus. Their bosses bring their uniqueness to it. So even in one church, Zach, you might have a kids resident and a worship resident. The way each of those experiences are feeling are very different because we all bring good and we all bring stuff that needs transformation into those conversations. And that's where the coaching is in a 2-year process. What do we do? We help architect these things. We help them find the leader. We help them interview and onboard in a proper way. And then we're coaching. People think we do this for the 22-year-old. Really, we're doing it for their boss.
Yeah.
We're helping their boss not overwhelm, frustrate, get frustrated to lead to an early departure, either quitting or getting fired. So it's primarily coaching over those 2 years.
Yeah, and you talked a lot about the uniqueness of kind of developing a young leader. You've talked a lot about kind of life on life and be ready and willing to enter into mentoring of all types, kind of the whole person. And you mentioned that word resident a couple times, and that's really what you are and what Leadership Pathway, you're experts in the residency world, the residency program for churches. Yeah. I want to back up though, because I don't know that that's a known term in a lot of the Lutheran churches that I'm a part of. And so I'd love for you to maybe tell us what exactly is a church residency program, maybe kind of pair it with an internship program or what the uniquenesses or similarities or differences are, just to kind of back up so we can kind of understand what is a residency program from your perspective.
Yeah, when we compare it to internships is observing, it's tasks, it's kicking the tires and discovering, like, could I see myself doing this someday? It's short. It's a summer, it's a semester, sometimes 10 months or a year. There's no expectation on the back end. I'm going to be an intern. We all know immediately what we think of, right? Making copies, working camp, doing things that need to get done, and you're getting a taste. Then in the second column, what's a resident? High expectation, just like in a teaching hospital. In a teaching hospital, you can have surgery, you can come to healing in both of these places. But a teaching hospital has a secondary mission to crank out future physicians and surgeons, right? Mm-hmm. A normal hospital is not doing that. This is a developmental kind of place that's actually got some young physicians in process there. And the idea is that someday they're on their own. It's not temporary. It's where we get into words like calling. We do gap years, we do internships, we do undergrad stuff, we do all sorts of things from age 18 to something. At some point, we figured out, I am going to do this. When someone is applying for a residency and they don't know yet, do I want to do? I'm not sure. We normally tell them to go find a great gap year, go find an internship. Here's some people we know that are looking for people to do that. They don't get accepted into the residency. The clock is ticking. It's 2 years. We have 104 weeks. And, at your church, can they do your job at some point in the next 104 weeks? What does that mean for Tuesday morning? So we talk about skills and sequence. Who are they uniquely? Assessing them. Where are they right now? What do we need to learn tomorrow that puts us on the sequence of time that they can be doing this in 104 weeks. A physician told me, inside of a teaching hospital, there are doctors who are so excited when the fresh batch of young residents walk in. And there are other doctors that roll their eyes and say, kids these days, here they come. They got it. They're all excited. We got to beat this out of them. So she's like, even inside a teaching hospital, you have various degrees of surgeons and physicians who are good at passing this along, observing, commenting, speaking into them, showing them how to do it. And you have some that struggle. I see the same thing in churches. The big thing about a resident is at the end of 104 weeks, if they're not hireable at a local church, that's a problem. We had one, and it was the last one I was in charge of. I got out, and we have smarter people here now.
So you just tell them what to do, but you can't do it. Is that how it is?
I can't do it. Oh, I can't do it. Well, we have smart people here that help church leaders doing this. I have my unique gifts, Zach, just like you. So at the end of this process, we are not doing it to disciple young adults. We are not doing it to help them fall more in love with Jesus. Those things happen. I would hope anyone who spends 2 years on your staff is going to love Jesus more, is going to be a disciple to a greater extent, right? That's not the center of our target, though. The center of our target is helping solve this issue that I still get asked about every day, which is, do you know anyone that wants to move to Omaha and be a kids pastor? And I'm like, good luck with, I'll see you in 9 months, maybe, or a year.
Right.
Is there a plan by which, speaking into their life, mentoring, we have coaching materials, we have curriculums and digital resources and all of this stuff. Education's part of it. I would say that. It's one of a few things that need to be present and need to be assessed as we move forward. But education and spiritual formation, those are the two that we know well in churches for a couple thousand years. We know how to instruct.
Right.
And we know how to, in our language, put people in groups and hope they're getting discipled. But spiritual formation is what we've been about. We're in an era where it's just going to take more than that. Mm-hmm. And so when I say leadership development, if you have an MDiv from seminary and your heroes in your life were Dr. So-and-so who taught that course, then when I say leadership development, you immediately think books, reading dead guys, allowing the things of theological studies, and you're receiving instruction from someone. If that wasn't your path and you were more of some guy had you in a men's group for a decade studying Romans, took 10 years to get through Romans, as I recall, and you stayed up late praying and you went on, then when you think spiritual formation, you think sitting in a circle, getting real, getting honest, leadership development would be those two things for sure. And soft skill development and best practices and a mental wellness plan and developmental feedback conversations. And these guys are like, what? Wait, what? What did you say? And we'll be assessing all these things along the way. We're assessing these things. We really started, man. It was all about soft skills 12 years ago. It still is, really. How do people walk in their room? Their emotional intelligence, can they relate? But I would say mental wellness is definitely a trend. 9 years ago, we were saying, sometimes you're going to come up against this. And then we started saying a lot of the time.
Every time. And now some churches, the senior pastor stands in the pulpit and says things like, my therapist this week told me, and it's totally accept. Other places we work with, they would never do that. And that's okay. That's okay. We're not here to change those churches. We want to work inside their framework. But what's the plan? And if they've never experienced this, then they need to know what to look for. What are we looking for long before we need professional counseling help?
So a mental wellness plan, best practices of how to do ministry today, developmental conversations. Have you ever sat down and had one of those? And if you're a pastor and you're pastorally minded, you're going to say things like, well, can he just read the room? Can he just, I've been saying it. I'm like, well, tell me what you said. Well, I said, pray about it. And wait, no, I didn't say it. I'm like, yeah, that's okay, man. You're going to have to say it. You're going to have to verbalize it. Don't wear a hat next time we're recording a Zoom thing. Or you can't walk in the room this way. And you might have to say it multiple times.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So anyway, all of these things have to be present. All the domains of their life are on the table. And we have to be prepared for that. I think, Zach, more than people will say, churches just don't know how to develop leaders. I tend to believe, man, it's more about the size of the organization. Now, I get in trouble for saying this, but what little bit of for-profit work I've been around, when they got to about 80, 90 employees, they added extra HR people. They started the culture development person was hired. These job titles, you can't imagine under 50 employees. We're over here in the church. Sometimes there's one employee. Sometimes, there might be 15 or 20. That's a church of 1,000 or 1,500, right?
It's a significant
It's a big church. A significant church. It's a very small business. You go into any small business in America, Bud's Muffler Shop or a great restaurant, there's 10 employees, half of them have the same last name. They're not talking about culture. They're not talking about leadership development. The super cool ones are in the magazine out in, San Francisco. The normal church, normal businesses, no, you figure it out or you can't work here. I'll fire you in 6 months or you're going to quit. And half of us are family. So when dad nods, we know what that means. And it meant something different on Thursday than it did on Tuesday. There's no policies. There's very little there's no onboarding or training. You just do it. We just do it. I've been guilty of this myself. Bringing someone in, just do it. You'll figure it out. That just does not work today. If it's worked for the people that are listening to this, God just likes you more. That's all I would say. You've just either God's blessing is on you or you've been lucky. And it might be both, depending the situation. So these things that we're going to have to learn how to do, because gone are the days when we would start with a big number of undergrad people, and out the end of the seminary came enough people to fill the roles. And then out of that group, the ones that quit at 2 or 3 years in, there were still some people walking who could fill the pulpits.
Yeah.
Back to Carey Nieuwhof and Barna and these people that are saying ridiculous things like 60,000 pulpits are going to be empty in the next decade or something crazy. You hear these things and you're just like, I can't find one. And you're talking about 60,000.
Right.
And I've been to the seminaries. I've been to the colleges, the ones that are still open. I love them. We got to help these people. But it's the ground, and I feel bad. I feel bad because these are lovely people. Listen, man, the ground is changing under their feet, and it's changing. I mean, I've heard experts talk about the difference this year between a 22-year-old and a 21-year-old. I'm like, you used to give us a decade or two to catch up. You have to know what's going on around you and in culture and who these people are. And our institutions.
You got to, back to Chronicles. You got to know the times and understand what to do.
I'm going to look it up. I wrote it down.
But I think that's a huge piece of the issue, and why I resonate with you and why I can talk with you forever about this stuff is because some of the same stuff you're mentioning is stuff that I'm seeing not just locally in my context at King of Kings, but then on a national scale for the Lutheran Church. It's like we have this awesome vision at King of Kings to open up new campuses and You know what you need in new campuses? You're going to need new leaders, new staff.
That's right.
And so we've got to work on developing a leadership pipeline in-house because that's always been effective. And then when I look at things nationally in our pastoral shortage, but also many other, like you, I get asked all the time of we're hiring for a youth person or a next gen person or a worship leader. Who do you know, Zach? And I'm like, gosh, I don't.
Yeah.
I'm racking my brain to try to get you one name. And I might have one to give you, but I'm pretty sure they're content with where they are. And so we're in this system that we're struggling. And so it's leading me more and more to believe that we, and I say we being the ones that work in local churches, we've got to be the champion of that for our own local churches.
Totally.
Now, that won't solve our LCMS problem of pastors. That's a whole different conversation. But we can at least shape and form many of our leaders that could potentially be future staff in-house if we had more of and that's why I love getting to connect with you. If we had something like a residency program, we have hope. We don't have nothing to shoot from, but it's a big deal. And
Listen,
yet it's still the right decision, even if it's going to take a lot. Is that all
in
correct?
In a church of 100, there is someone who could be doing something on a church staff. Now, I'm going to set aside what it means to be. I know there's ordination, and I know there's preaching, and I know there are offices. Then I'm staying away from that. I'm over here with like kids.
Yeah, you're safe. You're safe staying away from that stuff.
Communications director, the kids pastors,
Production.
the kids leaders, directors, the worship directors, all of that stuff. There are people in St. Louis. There's a guy. He was Missouri's Teacher of the Year, and he was working in whatever they call Vacation Bible School. He's 40 years old, teaching middle school band, but working with the kids, doing and up leading. And the pastor takes him out to lunch the next week and says, "Man, you are great. Would you ever want to be a kids director?" He's like, "Are you serious? I've been praying for this. I'll do it." I'm like, "It was that." He goes, "Listen, man, in the time we could get the hamburger eaten, he asked, I was called, I said yes. He says, you got to go talk to your wife? Yeah, probably, and pray about it. Sure. But I'm in. And I'm thinking, in every church, there's the sharp gal, but she's the CEO of the bank or the hospital in town. There's the guy that has a position of power. There's someone who we believe makes so much money, they would never take the cut it would take to come over here and do this. And I'm just like, why would you not sit down and just bold face ask them?
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great reminder to me. Having that conversation, I'm like, I can't believe he asked the Missouri Teacher of the Year. He goes, "Yeah, man, I had to. It's like a big deal. Like there were things I was supposed to do the next year. It's sort of like Miss America. You have to show up at some events and do some." He's like, "I abandoned all of it, threw away 15 years as a teacher to go on the staff at my church." There's people like that in every church. Now, does he need some training? Yes. Does he need some coaching? Of course. Spiritual formation and shown what best practices are? Of course. We've all had friends to go on staff at a church. Sometimes even they're elders and board members, and they go on the staff, and they're like, these people are crazy. So, it takes some care and a different type of development for that person than it does for a 22-year-old. But there's people out there, man. For every dime, dollar, or minute we spend broadcasting these jobs or going to seminary job boards or all that, we 10x that through relationships, through teaching churches how to network through their body of Christ. Who do you know that might know someone? And even in a small church, there's someone who loves you, who they're all bought in, they're sacrificially giving, they're showing up and serving. They might have a nephew or a kid who's online at Concordia getting an education. Can we tap them and invite them into a process. I think we can. I'm seeing it happen. Now, 65,000 pastors and a national scope. I'm like, I don't know. It's like, can I fix healthcare? I don't know. I know I can fix them one at a time at these places we're engaged because I'm seeing it happen. The other thing I'm seeing, if you want to develop your staff, if there's more than one person on your team, and you're like, what's the best way to develop that youth leader or that adult education director? Hand them a resident who wants to do their job in 2 years. It will sharpen them up because they go through curriculum thinking, I've got to pass this on to this young lead. I'm not even doing these things. So we hear consistently from executive and senior pastors, we thought we were doing this for the 22-year-old. Turns out it made our 40-year-old Christian education director a lot better leader because he has someone that they're trying to mentor and lead. So anyway, but it's all intention. It takes more intentionality than it does plan. How about that? There's plans, and normally the biggest plan is, yes, we'll do it. And then we start. And then down the road, there's hurdles to get over. And that's okay. We'll get there. We'll get over the hurdles of all of these things. But you got to start.
Yeah.
If you don't start, you look down and the hurdles just sort of stack up. And you're like, well, we don't have the money. We don't have a plan. We don't have the education. What about this? What about that? We'll figure it out. I mean, people tell me I want to make leaders like Jesus. Well, Jesus walked everywhere. His unfair advantage of how slow life moved. You would not need a therapist or a diet. Or if we said, let's go hold a revival in Lincoln, how long would it take you and me to walk to Lincoln, Nebraska from Omaha? A long time. And we would talk about everything before we got there.
Right.
And whoever's leading and mentoring who here, we'd be pretty killer. We don't have that advantage. But for 2,000 years ago, Paul planting churches, those boat rides were long. Those walks were long. Mm-hmm. You don't think those people were investing in Titus and Philemon and these people who are John Mark, these people, they didn't even get along, some of them, and they were planting churches. So if we want to develop leaders like they did 2,000 years ago, it's going to take time, which is a precious resource, and talking. My marketing friends, some of our mutual friends, they're like, how's this scale? How's it scale? I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm starting to say it doesn't scale. One youth director with someone who wants to be a youth director and someone checking in, and I'll see you in 2 years, you'll have a second youth director in 2 years.
Right.
And I don't know how that scales. We can scale education. Put 100 kids in a room at Concordia Irvine, teach them English. We know how to scale education. We can even scale spiritual formation a little bit. 10 at a time, whatever your church is doing, 3 at a time. This thing of leadership development, man, it is two people talking and working it out. Actually, they're both being developed. Yeah. One of them we know has to be developed. They're both being developed. And it takes a while, but we get there. Yeah. So let's not make it complex. There's lots about ministry that is complex. Uh-huh. People's lives, sin, things that happen in a church. These things are complex. How do we help someone join your staff team in 2 years? We walk with them and we talk about it. For Leadership Pathway, we would say I wouldn't do that alone. You'd want someone coaching the coach, so to speak. And that's what we're doing, but let's not make it more complex than it has to be.
I think that's beautiful, and I think there are big issues that we need to figure out, and people need to get in rooms and have conversations and make the right decisions for kind of some of the scale questions, if you will.
For sure.
I'm certainly a proponent of that, and kind of banging the drum of we need to continue to do that with how we form and shape our pastors and future leaders. But what I love about the residency idea is, yes, it feels pretty robust, but it's doable. And
Yeah.
it's one person leading one person, or one church leading one or two people. And I think many of us can do that, and we don't need all the right answers. And so I'm really thinking about that and seeing that could be a great answer to a lot of Lutheran churches right now, and more than just Lutheran churches, to those that are looking for who's my next youth person, who's the next kids person, where's our next worship leader going to come from. I think what you're kind of encouraging me to see and others to see is that they're probably already at your church. Just bold face ask them and walk with them. You don't have to have all 2 years figured out. And if you need help with that, that's stuff that you guys help out with. But that feels doable for each of us in our own context. And if enough of us do that, then great. We're going to be in good shape. Because we're struggling. Like Dave, our numbers in the LCMS, you mentioned Carrie saying something like 60,000 pulpits are going to be vacant. We're at 996 churches of our less than 6,000 vacant, almost 20%. And we are, in the next 15 years, when you start talking about retirements, and going to go somewhere from 6,000 pastors to 3,000 pastors in 15 years. And so in my world...
I'll tell you, man, that is I hadn't heard any of that, by the way.
Yeah, and so that's where we're headed statistically. And God can change, and people can hang on a few more years after retirement, but it's not a sustainable thing. We've got to do something. And so
Mr. and Miss LCMS leaders, here's what I would say, is that residents, a lot of times, I'm just generalizing, residents become youth leaders. Youth leaders, what do they become?
Yeah, pastors. As long as you got a pathway for them.
I mean, a decade ago, people were like, do y'all do church planting residency? And we tried one. It was a disaster. I'm like, you know what? Residents become youth pastor. We do the youth pastor, kids pastor, those middle manager type of roles, right? And if they can stay in the game, they'll be your pastor. They'll be your church planter someday. But we can't skip all those important steps. So I would just say, if that's going to happen in the next 10 years, is that what you said?
15 years, 6,000 to 3,000 approximately. And that's from our own synod's publications. That's not a couple of us that are trying to make this sound fear-mongering. That's what they're saying.
So any business leader would tell you, and let's pretend we were talking about lunch boxes or anything we would manufacture, right? I don't know why lunch boxes came to mind. Anything. We needed more water. We weren't going to have water bottles. And we'd be like, well, we better shorten up the time it takes to create these things. And it better be cheaper, evidently. It's been too expensive to do it. I'm just speaking as a non-LS.
Lunch boxes.
Lunch boxes, water bottles, cars, roofs over we have a housing issue. I think anyone would look at a 15-year trend that you actually have numbers to predict. In my clan, which is about the same size as your clan, I'm sure it's the same, by the way. I'm sure it's the same. We just don't know because we claim it's not a denomination. It's probably worse, actually, now that I think about it.
So there's less reporting, less all that stuff. Yeah.
And so we would have to say we better make the path. I don't mean easier or less. I just mean something radically has to change.
Yeah.
Or we'll have no lunch boxes. We'll have no water bottles. I mean, when I was writing that book,
which means we're not eating and drinking, which means you
we're
can't
dead.
live
I mean,
long.
this is a killer. I've never met, and your dad one of them, I've never met a church leader that didn't have enough vision or even didn't have enough money once they went and asked for it, or building, or none of those things ever stopped these churches. I don't care. I mean, I lived the one crash financially, the housing thing. We lived the COVID, and I was out working with churches that were growing. Why? Disciples do things that are crazy, like give away money even though unemployment is up and the plant just closed in their town. They still built the building. You know what limited those churches were the leaders. Every time, bro, we would launch the campus if we had a campus pastor. We would do the thing if we could have the thing. I've been in meetings that were amazing dreams and then go down the hall and someone like you goes like, the meeting after the meeting in their office, they're like, hey, she's not going to be here when you come back. I'm like, what? We just dreamed for 40 minutes. about something went on and he won't be here. And I'm just like, okay, who's going to lead for 2,000 years? And Jesus, hey, blame Jesus. He says, y'all have a saying here. We'll get to it tomorrow. But I'm telling you, look at the field. Where's the workers?
Yeah.
That's convicting, man. And for me in my 20s and 30s, I did not do this, Zach. My hair was on fire. I was working at a church similar to the one you're in. We were doing some stuff. We thought we were moving fast. We weren't moving fast. It was dinosaur slow compared to what you're doing today. We had some interns. Some of them kept up. They're still in ministry today. But the great majority, did I wake up on Tuesdays thinking, what am I going to do intentionally to coach and develop these people so they could be doing this someday? I did not. It's people like me, and here our best thinking has brought us to this point.
Right.
Dude, there's a 24-year-old in the LCMS probably ought to be influencing this next 15 years. So it doesn't, we can only close so many of these.
Right.
We can only merge into campuses so many of these. There are limits here. I think the mandate in the New Testament for a couple thousand years, 2 Timothy 2:2, show some other people how to do this that you trust. The things I've shown you, show to someone else. Is that going to take 4 years and $80,000? Golly. If it does, I was at a great Christian university that I won't name, not in your movement, and I met all these students. It's like $40,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's undergrad.
Yeah.
Studying worship and youth and these things. And I'm just like, what do we?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, you could edit
I
that
agree.
out.
No,
we need to be smarter than ever. I say this all the time. You have to be smarter than ever to be in ministry today. Please be smart, get an education. Is that going to be the thing that rudders the ship? Is that going to be the thing that sets the pace for our movement? I can talk freely because I don't have to show up. I would love these people if I spent a day with them. I guarantee it's true of every group I've been in. I go into these churches and I'm like, this is a weird church. I don't believe what they believe. I don't practice what. And then after a weekend, I'm like, I love these guys. If I moved to this town, I'd go to. I've always thought that. Mm-hmm. And the theology piece is in there. These are lovely people. These are amazing people. We have to do it faster, and we have to do it cheaper, and we have to get down to the essence of what do these churches need in these communities in the next decade, it sounds like.
That's what I believe, and it's why I love talking with you, because you make me remember that I'm not crazy for my thoughts.
You're not crazy, dude.
And in fact,
those numbers you just said, that's a killer.
Yeah, and part of it, like knowing that the time that you came to Omaha and I had breakfast with you is the very same day that I remember vividly now that was right after walking out of breakfast was when I heard our seminaries had restricted pathways and raised the age limit to those to probably the most accessible form of becoming an ordained pastor through our SMP program to 40 years old. And I'm like, I just talked with Dave. Like we're talking about young people being pastors.
Listen, dude.
And Dave's right, and I agree with Dave. And then y'all just did this, and so I
Zach, 40,
posting
just like the disciples, just like Jesus,
right.
just like George Washington and the founder. They were all 60, I think.
Right.
Listen, there's a very inappropriate song that is not the official opinion of Red Letter or Zach. It's called by John Mayer. It's old. It's called "Slow Dancing in a Burning Room," and that's what's playing in my head. And he's like, "Yeah, we're slow dancing, but the house is burning down around us."
Right.
And that is a call. That's a bell to be rung.
Yeah. Well,
those
we're trying
numbers
to ring it. And the other piece too is like that I've gotten a lot of peace on and started to talk about publicly is not all of us need to wait on the denomination to do things. We can do things ourselves. And that's part of what I love about a residency program is you don't need to wait on the denomination to do everything. You can raise up leaders yourself. Again, it's not going to solve kind of the pastoral pipeline problem that we're dealing with. But like, what can you do? What can I do that is pro younger, pro next generation, pro moving the denomination forward? And if all of us take steps in that direction, guess what? The denomination will catch up, and they'll figure it out with us.
Here's your soundbite. If you're a pastor in the LCMS and you have 1 or 10 staff leaders on your team, challenge each of them to carry the name in their wallet of who the next you is.
That's good.
And immediately they're going to say, you don't understand. My volunteers suck. That's okay. In the New Testament, they started these things and they looked around while they drew straws. I don't really understand that. They're like, all right, you're it. I'm sailing this way. I'll be back. And of course, it was crazy. I've read the New Testament. It was insane what was going on in these churches in the New Testament. Way worse than anything on the Royce Report today of what was going on in those churches. It didn't stop them from planting churches or calling people or tapping people to do it. So challenge each of the either volunteer leaders or staff leaders. If you went on a 9-month cruise, who would do this next week? Make them write a name down and prayerfully consider that every day. Every time they open their wallet, that's their person. Who are they taking with them on the ministry stuff?
Who's the next you? I was going to ask you, we ask all our guests, if you could challenge our listeners to do one thing this week, what would you do? You already said it.
That's it.
Right? Identify the next you. That's good.
This was a hashtag on Instagram. It was a cliche. It was a sticker. Became a book. The beauty, it's actually a question.
Yeah.
That deserves an answer.
Yeah.
And when churches where we're working and we're on like number 15, 18, we've been there 6 years, starting new residencies. Those churches, they've taken that to heart, and those staff leaders at all levels, from the senior pastor to the nursery, associate nursery director sometimes, who could do their role if they were gone? Mm-hmm. That's where this is working the best, is they own it at that level.
That's beautiful. Well, Dave, you're a rock star. I think what you're doing is awesome. Our podcast is about to end, but we're going to have more conversations, you and I, especially with some of the new stuff I'm doing with Hodos, the new movement for Lutheran young adults. We're starting it with a catalytic event because that's what you want to do with a new organization. So we're going to have a big old Lutheran young adult gathering in 2027. But I'm really thinking a couple steps ahead of that, too, of like, how do we form a residency program, a pilot program out of that gathering that then can be replicated in other Lutheran churches. And so just so you know, like, that's on my radar, and I would love to process that through with you.
For sure.
So that we can start raising up more leaders in our denomination. And I'm super pumped about it and glad to know you and thankful for what you do. So, hey, if people want to connect with you, where can they find you or how can they connect?
Leadershippathway.org would be the easiest way. And all the stuff's there. They'll find it.
Awesome. And some of you listening may already be like sold on the idea of a residency program. You just want to talk to Dave.
Let's do it.
I think that'd be an awesome thing to do to get this thing going in your church. And so I know he'd make himself available to do that. So appreciate you, Dave. Any other last words or anything you want to say that I didn't ask you that's like, you didn't ask me that, and I want to get that off my chest?
No one has ever asked me that, Zach, because usually by the time we get to this point, they're like, good grief, would he please stop riffing and talking?
Nice. Well, very good. Well, thank you, Dave. Have a great day, my man. Appreciate you. Well, huge thanks to Dave Miller for coming on to today's podcast. His book, Who's the Next You, is available. It's going to dive deep into what it looks like to forming and developing leaders, especially in the 18 to 29-year-old range. Super grateful for Dave coming on, and I've got all the links for the book and everything else we talked about in the show notes at redletterpodcast.com. Thanks again to today's sponsor, Hodos, Hodos, a road forward for the next generation of Lutherans. You can go to hodosway.com to find out more information about this organization, to put your email in to stay updated, especially on all things, but the Lutheran Young Adult Gathering of 2027 is coming together and nicely being shaped and formed as we speak. And so don't miss out on any updates there, hodosway.com. Hey, subscribe to the Red Letter Disciple so you're back for next week's episode. We got some really great episodes coming up. that is going to challenge you to be a greater disciple of Jesus, and it'll be an honor to be back with you next week. Have a great week. God bless you.